Folks, in the first hour, we told you about and we showed you this video of a disturbing shooting in Oklahoma, where a black man with his hands up was shot and killed by two police officers. Now, those officers have been charged, but the family says that, sorry, folks, first-degree manslaughter charges for killing Quadry Sanders simply is not good enough. The family's attorney, Lee Merritt, joins us right now. Lee, glad to have you here. So what were you and the family looking for in terms of charges for these officers for the death of this 29-year-old brother? Lee, we can't hear you.
All right.
There we go.
Thank you, sir. When the Comanche County prosecutors released the video on Friday, it was the first time that I or any member of the family had a chance to actually see what happened to Mr. Sanders. It's difficult to find how the facts given or laid out in that video fit into a manslaughter or accidental death category. These men seemed to move with intention and malice when they told him to put up his hands and repeatedly shot him. Body center mass. It seems like their intent was to cause the death, and that will be more appropriate for a murder charge in Oklahoma.
Obviously, it is a lot more difficult to convict officers on murder. So could it be that prosecutors felt they had a better shot at conviction by going the manslaughter route?
You know, historically, we've seen prosecutors charge a lesser included. And it turns out that if you don't have the facts, circumstances, the mens rea, for example, to actually prove out the lower charge, then you stand a greater chance of an acquittal in that case. And so instead of building in a defense for these officers, we've seen prosecutors aggressively go after murder charges. We saw that in the case of Amber Geiger and Botham Jean recently. We saw that in the case of Jordan Edwards and Roy Oliver. And each time, although in the case of Botham Jean, you will recall the investigators recommended a manslaughter charge, but the prosecutor saw that the facts were more consistent with a murder charge, went after the higher level charge, and was able to get a historic conviction.
And in this case here, first of all, these two officers are no longer on the force, correct?
That's correct. They were terminated shortly after the December shooting.
So clearly, that is important when it comes to when this case goes to trial, the fact that the police department felt that their actions were not justified.
Yeah, although the standard, the employment standard is not the criminal standard, it certainly is an indication that there was no justification in the shooting if they were terminated after the fact.
Questions from my panel. First off, Michael Brown.
Hey, how are you, man? Keep, as usual, keep up the good work. You're always on the front lines.
Thank you, Brother Brown.
With the outside of the criminal part, any chance of any kind of civil action? Because we've been talking about on the show earlier is until these officers face some consequences, we just don't know if indeed conduct will change. So whether you hit them in the pocketbook, whether because of, if on the criminal side, if it's related to their pensions or this qualified immunity, or you sue the city or the police department. So you guys considering that as well?
Yeah, we're certainly looking into a wrongful death suit and a civil rights suit. I'm really particularly glad you asked that question in this case and put it in that context, because the officer who fired the initial shots and fired 11 of the 15 shots fired into Quadry Sanders was suspected of excessive force and guilty of shooting another unarmed black man just last year, one that was the subject of protests. And we often see that an officer who was found to use deadly force wrongfully in a big high-profile case, you scratch the surface just a little bit and you'll find repeated instances of excessive use of force. That's something that has to be dealt with in the civil suit. So that's why we're bringing our Monell claim and our federal claim, but also as we push for policy out of D.C. that would help reduce the amount of shootings, we're asking for better tracking methods for officers, in decertification methods for officers who have been guilty of the misuse of force in the past.
Got it. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Makongo?
Yes, Mr. Merritt,
Go ahead.
I have so much respect for what you do. I mean, you've been such a true warrior for us in our community. The question I have for you is kind of two-part question. Number one, why has it taken 5 to 6 months for this video to be released for the family to even see? And how is this family and so many other families you deal with dealing with the re-traumatization of having something like this broadcast to the entire country and really the world?
Yeah. So Oklahoma, as you know, we live in the deadliest police culture in the modern world. So no other developed nation kills or incarcerates so many of its citizens. And Oklahoma is right up there with California, Texas, and Louisiana as one of the most difficult places to hold police officers accountable, and in one of the locations where officers are often acquitted. That the investigation begins with law enforcement officers independently determining whether or not use of force was lawful. They make that determination and they make a recommendation of prosecution to the prosecutor. Now, in Dallas County, where I work, and some of the more progressive places like Minnesota, where we saw the convictions out of for the murder of George Floyd, the reverse is true. Prosecutors lead the investigation from the beginning, and we often see more accountability in those cases because when law enforcement investigates their own shootings, they often will justify themselves. Although this shooting was just very difficult even for officers to justify.
Jeff.
Yes, Attorney Merritt, thanks again, man, for everything you're putting in the world. Again, you're on the front line, man, and we talk about where people go. A lot of times as a spiritual leader, if somebody sees me in a bar somewhere in the middle of the night, they say, what are you doing here? I say, I go where I'm needed. So you are absolutely needed in Oklahoma, and you're there. What does the timeline for justice look like? Because a lot of people, we can get impatient when we say, why didn't this happen the next day? What does the journey to justice look like in this case? Are we talking months? Are we talking years?
Well, again, we can only go by way of example. Now, more recently, we saw the Ahmaud Arbery case go to trial and get convictions within a year and a half of Ahmaud's murder. We saw the same being true in George Floyd because some of the high-profile nature of these trials have accelerated the process, frankly. But in the case of, let's say, a Tatiana Jefferson, who was killed nearly 3 years ago in Fort Worth playing video games with her nephew, you'll recall. We just showed up to court for that last week, and we got another delay until sometime this summer in June. In 3-4 year trials later down the line, with officers free on bail until then, is the pattern that is normal in places like Oklahoma and Texas.
Look, it is certainly a sad story. Having to watch that video was shocking, stunning, but hopefully we will see a conviction in this case. Lee Merritt, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I'll certainly pass that on to the family. The other question asked was how they were doing, and yeah, this has destroyed them. That it's going and circulating through the media again. They need it because they want the attention on the case, but it has been a difficult time for them. So we are soliciting your prayers and support.
All right, thank you so very much. All right, folks, back to our Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?